Well, hey everybody, Wes McDonald here, and I want to thank you for joining us for another episode of Level Up Live. And I'm here, as most often, with my good buddy Ken Edmonds. How are you, Ken?
I am fine. Actually, it's a beautiful day where I am today, and so looking forward to having some fun.
Yeah, it is here too, and we were discussing that pre-show that we finally have a stretch of sunny weather, right? And it's amazing what it does for the soul. So I am super energized today, right? And I trust that you are as well. And it's a good thing we're talking about trust because our guest is an expert in the area and look forward to bringing in them soon. Before we get started, though, your favorite question?
Is where's everybody joining us from today? We always like to know where people join us because we do have an international audience. I know for me today, I'm in Astoria, Oregon, a beautiful town right on where the Columbia River runs into the Pacific Ocean, home to some of the most dangerous waters in the world. And we're going to be at the Maritime Museum today, looking to see some of that history.
Well, I'm super jealous, and I do love that area of the world. And although it's dangerous, it is some of the most stunning ocean views you can get in the world, right? Just absolutely
Oh yeah.
gorgeous area. And I am joining you as most times you can see from my background in lovely Canada, right across the border from Buffalo, just 20 minutes to downtown. And so without further ado, let's bring in our guest. And an important topic today, I think, especially as we're doing things like this, right, is the concept of insta-trust. Make sure you leave your comments and questions throughout. We'll get to them. And if we don't get to them on the live stream, then we will get to them in the post recording, because as you know, you can view this both on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So I trust that is useful for everyone. And back to trust, let's bring in the expert. How are you, Larry?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me. And it's also beautiful and sunny in Chicago today after a cold, rainy week last week. Glad that we have sunshine. I agree with you. It just makes all the difference in the world in terms of our moods.
Yeah, it sure does. Even if we're not outside enjoying it, right? Just I work right in front of a window, and just even having that ability is really wonderful, right? And
Yes.
looks like we have Sarah Henderson joining us from Iowa. Hey, Sarah, how are you? Good to see you. And one of the things you can do for us, maybe nobody knows you better than yourself, if you could do a brief introduction for our audience.
Are you talking to me or for Sarah?
Oh, I'm talking to you. I know Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah, we know Sarah.
She's
Hi,
awesome, by the way.
Hi, Sarah. So I'm Larry Jacobson. I am what we call a transition specialist, meaning I work with owners of professional practices, primarily oral surgeons, in terms of what I call their turning points, whether it's buying a practice, selling a practice, bringing in an associate, restructuring, bringing in new owners, important long-term strategies in terms of expansion and all. And so we really, we really focus on helping people navigate the critical turning points of their career.
Well, that's great, and really appreciate you, coming in to talk with us today. And I will bring this up quickly because obviously you are an author as well, and we're going to dive in today in your book, Insta-Trust. And this is a great concept, and I think especially now as we're doing things in a much more remote way, that sometimes this question of Insta-Trust is so valuable, right? So why don't we start there? Maybe you could share with our audience what the concept of Insta-Trust really means.
Sure, glad to do so. Insta-Trust is both a mindset and a process where you put the relationship building at the forefront of your initial meeting in a business setting. So it's a mindset on the one hand, and it's a process on the other hand. And it's important because in so many initial meetings, and it could be with a doctor, a lawyer, but this applies to sales, negotiations, or whatever, people just tend to jump into it. They just tend to, you've got a situation where, doctors and lawyers are on the clock and they just want to start delving into diagnostic mode. Yeah. And that turns off people, because what professionals and again, and salespeople don't understand is they know their topic. They
Yeah.
know what and how to solve a need of somebody, but yet they don't relate to people on a personal level. And so the whole notion of insta-trust is to try to, number one, relate to them on a human level. And then number two, try to find out what it means, what's their personality in terms of that. And so, I see that you've got the four key elements of insta-trust on the
Yeah.
screen. So, we can just get into that. The first thing is within the first 3 to 5 minutes, you should, number one, try to understand their problem. And I'm not necessarily saying that what they think their problem is the problem, because often we're dealing with people whose problem may be very much different than what they think it is. But you're really trying to understand their problem. Then you're trying to show how important it is to you to help them solve their problem. So you're trying to build a connection and empathy while you're basically trying to figure out, what their problem is. Third, and this is something where a lot of people fall down, is to really indicate to them by word, gestures, tone, etc., how hard you're willing to work to solve their problem. Because if you do something in a monotone voice and what have you, and you don't and you don't gesture and what have you, they're not going to pick up on how important it is to you to help them solve their problem. So that's number three. And then number four is, during this process of 1 through 3, trying to determine what their personality traits are, and then tailor the remainder of your approach to their personality. Because the challenge is, too many people have a single tool in their toolbox. And we've got people who have completely different personalities, and something that might work with, let's say, somebody who's knowledgeable about the subject isn't going to work with somebody who's not knowledgeable, or somebody who is very, what we call, close to the vest, that,
Yeah.
they just don't, offer things up quickly, and you've got to systematically try to take it out of them, so to speak.
Yeah, I like that. And I think, I'm a big believer in this. I'll bring the point up again, that determining the personality traits and tailor their approach. It's actually quite caring to do that, right? To meet somebody where they are, as opposed to trying to take them where we are. And I often do that, as well. And I think it's an emotional quotient as well, right? When we talk about emotional intelligence, to be aware of people and where they're at. And I wonder, maybe you can give a few tips on how people might more easily be able, to do this, to tailor their approach to different personalities.
Well, that really gets into active listening. I mean, the key to all of this, frankly, is to basically be 100% razor focused on the person or persons you're dealing with, and ask questions that are designed, obviously, in the first instance, to help you better understand why they're sitting there with you, whether virtually or in person, but also to try to figure out who they are from a personality standpoint. I mean, one of my best friends told me, and this resonated with me, this was 15 years ago, that you have to take them as you find them.
Yes.
And that means that, let's say, I'll give you the example of the close to the vest. The close to the vest personality archetype, very simply, is somebody who does not volunteer information. They whether it's because of shyness, it's because of trust issues, or what have you, they just, you ask open-ended questions, and they give you, 3 to 5 word answers. And with them, frankly, what you need to do is you just need to ask a lot of questions that, frankly, at the beginning are not necessarily even diagnostic in terms of what their problem is, but really, trying to get them to feel that you're trustworthy enough and competent enough that they're willing to open up and share information. And so, with a close to the vest, you might even be working on relationship building more than, let's say, somebody who's what I'll call a long timer. Somebody who may seem like they're close to the vest, but what they are is they're very deliberate. They consciously, they'll make a decision, and if you're the right person, they'll hire you, but they're going to ask a whole lot of questions. And part of the process of dealing with them is you have to show patience. That's the other factor in all of this, is if things appear to be dragging out, we tend to be very impatient, and frankly, nonverbal cues, can set that off. You can start looking at your watch. You can start, twiddling your fingers or what have you, and people can pick up on that.
Yawning.
And so, in a situation like that, because frankly, people who are deliberate can sometimes be viewed as people who are close to the vest, but they're very different people. The person who is deliberate, probably has a lot of questions that are pertinent and appropriate, whereas the person who's close to the vest, probably it's just a function of skepticism and shyness.
Yeah, and I like this concept of active listening, right? And one of the great expressions that I use often is, we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? We should be doing probably at least twice as much listening as talking. And I think that when we are listening that way, I always get so much more out of it when I'm engaged with the person, looking them in the eye and really listening, right? It just gives me more to be able to work with them, with. And I think those people, like you said, that are close to the vest, it is always amazing sometimes when you see how they can actually open up given enough time, once they have that trust. And I think the faster you can get it, as your book, alludes to, the better that meeting will be, right?
Absolutely. And, what we found is, you said 2 to 1. And I didn't talk about this in the book, but I try to at least have a 3 to 4 to 1, between, let's assume the initial meeting's a half hour. I really want them to do the overwhelming amount of the talking, at least for the first 15 or 20 minutes, until I have enough to find out, how much I know about them, their problem, and so on. And then towards the end, it may be more 50-50, but certainly at the beginning, I really want it to be, about them. I want them to feel comfortable talking to me, because if they're feeling comfortable talking to me, that means that I'm slowly building trust with them. And then later on in the conversation, I can start being quote unquote more professional and start working with them in terms of actual potential problem solving.
Yeah, the only thing I can speak to in my own world is in my career, I've done a lot of what we call managed print assessments, which are going into environments and looking at the printers and copiers and what they're using them for. And oftentimes riding shotgun with, one of the national account sales reps or whatever, they instantly go in and it's almost like they feel like they've got the solution already, right? Too many printers, that copier doesn't have the proper tray, or start jumping to all these conclusions. And I can share one story in specific. We walked into a very large organization that had a printer on every desk. And usually that's because of, sort of haphazard planning or just things getting out of control, but not always, right? So the rep went in and said, "Oh, look at this, what a gold mine. We're going to be able to sell 20 copiers." But as it turns out, that when we asked the questions, like, "Hey, we notice you have a lot of printers on your desk. Can you please talk to us about that, what you're doing with them? And as it turns out, because of the fact that they were working with a hospital organization, they have very strict security parameters. That meant that each of those printers had to be serially connected to the device. It couldn't be connected with Ethernet. It couldn't be connected, like it couldn't be on the network, right? And it's that idea of listening for those cues that completely changed the, the conversation and the direction, right? So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, active listening is so important, and a lot of people talk about it. I mean, you hear it all the time. You should actively listen, and you can show that you're actively listening by paraphrasing. Although I will say, in my experience, the whole use of paraphrasing needs to be done judiciously, because if you paraphrase too much, you can come off as robotic, and so I think you have to pick and choose the situations where you paraphrase. But active listening is like anything else. It's like riding a bicycle. I mean, you've got to do it and do it and do it, and you learn by doing it. You don't learn it by reading a book. You don't learn it by watching videos. You learn it by having real live interactions with real live people about real important matters.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love what you said about active listening, and it ties to this idea of building trust. I had to put West in the timeout room, otherwise I can't get a word in. But I trust he'll be okay when I let him back in. But when you're dealing with customers that are upset, because I focus a lot on the service side of the business, and what happens is that if a customer's unhappy and they call to talk to the service manager, I think that active listening skills and build the ability to build trust is so critical, because if they don't believe that you care, or if they don't believe you can or are willing to try to fix their problems, and they don't trust you, you've got a problem that's really hard to resolve.
I agree 100%. And and people have asked me, how do you know when you've actually succeeded in building insta-trust with somebody? And it's very, very simple. If they feel comfortable that you're willing to go to war with them, to use a military metaphor, or you can say, get yourself dirty in the trenches with them, you've built trust. The whole goal of all of this is to make the other person feel comfortable that you have all of their best interests in mind. And it's not always financial. It could be personal, because some people may hire you, like for instance, a surgeon. You may hire a surgeon not based upon their reviews of their technical prowess and all, but you may not need your surgeon to be your best buddy that you'll go out to have a beer with. But you have to be working, even if you're a surgeon, you have to have at least a certain personality where you convey to that person, yeah, I'm really good at what I do, but doing it in a quiet, confident manner. I'm really good at what I do. And damn it, I'm going to, if your surgery takes 4 hours, we're going to do it. I mean, an example, pre-COVID, my wife had back surgery, and the diagnosis was, X and Y, and surgery was going to take 2 hours. But when they went in, they saw they needed to do something else and to basically expand, and it turned into a 4-hour surgery. But I had, and my wife obviously had, an enormous amount of confidence in the surgeon, because during our pre-surgery meetings, he answered all of our questions. He didn't say, he didn't look at his watch or anything like that. He basically conveyed the notion that he was going to be there until the job was done.
Yeah, and that's such a wonderful thing when somebody says, I got you, right? Like, and you believe them and you feel that no matter what. And I've been fortunate enough, Ken, I'm sure you have as well. I'm sure we all have had periods in our life when we've needed that, right? When we were uncertain of something, and someone said, no matter what, we think it's this right now, but if it's going to take more, I got you. Don't worry about it, right? And what a feeling that is.
Yeah, and I mean, this is true in any professional setting. I mean, surgery is easy, because the consequences are so serious. But, this is true with an accountant. If, you're looking to hire an accountant to, be your tax advisor, or you're hiring an attorney, to do a real estate deal, or you want to hire a new dentist, um, that will clean and your teeth and look at your teeth 2 or 3 times a year. It really doesn't matter. It's the same with the salesperson. I mean, if you're selling, let's say, high-end software, people aren't dumb. They realize that you're not the only person they're going to interact with. There's a technical team that they're going to interact with, but
Right.
they have to feel comfortable that you, the point person, if things go wrong, and they will, that you're there and you will be there, that you're not just going to disappear once the sale is complete, that gosh darn it, you're going to be there, to hold their hand and to, and to supervise the team that's going to fix the problem. That's what you have to, that's the attitude that you have to convey, and that's what they have to feel in order for you to be confident that you've built good
Yeah.
insta-trust.
And Dr. Jacobson, I want to add, that it is, I think, even more critical now for a lot of those complex sales because they're not a one-time sale. It's an ongoing subscription, right? That's the way the world's moved. So the importance of that relationship long-term to keep that, customer happy and paying, that's a modern reality, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, there are certain circumstances in life. I mean, hopefully you only see a back surgeon once in your life.
Yeah.
And if you've got a lawsuit, hopefully you don't get sued many times during your life. So there are certain things that are, yeah, fingers crossed. There are certain one-offs, so to speak, but a lot of relationships. What you're trying to do with insta-trust is you're trying to build basically what I call a core. You're basically trying to build a base, and that base, will start out with, initial preliminary trust, and then through your actions and deeds, you'll build tight bonds and have, real full scale trust that presumably can survive the inevitable turns in the road that will happen, because not everything will go smoothly. And that's true, in a sales context, but it's also true in a professional service context. You're not always going to win a deal. You're not always going to be able, you're an accountant. You're not always going to be able to convince the IRS that your your client owes zero taxes. But the bigger the trust base that you build, the more that the other person will understand that you did everything you could for them. But you can't always control the outside world, but you can control what you can control and the people that you work with.
Yeah. And when you have that trust and when things don't go your way, that you understand that that person really did try and do everything that they could for you, right?
Absolutely, which is why, as I said, the whole, everybody talks about elevator pitches and what have you, but to me, the whole notion of insta-trust is to ultimately get the person that you're working with feeling that you're ready, willing, and able to go to war with them, or to get dirty in the trenches. That is where you really want to be.
Yeah, my elevator pitch always was, and it was a bit cheeky, but when someone would ask you that inevitable question, like, what do you do? Like, what are you selling? And I would say, well, I don't know yet. And they'd be surprised and say, what do you mean you don't know? Like, clearly you get a paycheck and you're doing something. It's like, yeah, well, I don't know your business yet. And what I'm going to be selling, how I'm going to be helping you is really dependent on that, right? So yes, I can be generic and tell you that I'm in the software world and the software helps with this, but until I understand your business, I have nothing to sell you, right? That concept of active listening and really making sure that we're building solutions. I do like doctors and dentists as examples, especially for the modern business world, because those are relationships that are ongoing, right? That
Right.
you're going to be seeing them 2 or 3 times a year. And the same in the technology world now, when you're providing something quote unquote as a service, it is that continuous relationship where the connection, is ongoing in the long run, right?
Absolutely. And your comment really was spot on. I'll give you a personal example. My long-term internist retired on March 31st, 2020. And now he had announced it before COVID or what have you, but try to find an internist in the middle of COVID.
Oh, wow.
And to give you an understanding as to how deep the professional relationship was with my internist, is back in 2004, I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And about 14 or 15,000 feet up, I was having to go to the bathroom every 30 minutes. And that was probably a direct result of altitude sickness medicine called Diamox. And Diamox also works as a diuretic. And so I, was unclear really what I should do. So I literally take out my cell phone, and in Africa at the time, cell service was far better than landline. So I call my doctor's office and I get his receptionist, and I basically say, I'm on the top of, or I'm not on the top, but I'm on Mount Kilimanjaro. Got a pretty significant medical problem. Can you put me through to Bob? Okay. So she says he's with a patient, but I do understand that this qualifies as an emergency. So he gets on the phone with me, expresses concern about how I'm doing. I'm 8,000 miles away. And then, starts asking a bunch of questions. And he basically says, you've just got to get down from the mountain because you cannot stay on Diamox. And it's not safe for you to continue to climb and all of a sudden stop taking Diamox. And so you want to talk about, trust.
Yeah.
And what have you, try to replace that guy. And by the way, I will say that I probably made him more money than any of his other patients because he had a story he could tell.
Oh, sure.
Patients. He had a story that he could tell patients that to show you how much I care, I had to talk to a patient on top of Mount Kilimanjaro.
And I did it.
and I did it. So, having to replace him, was a challenge because I needed to find somebody, who wasn't a clock watcher or anything like that. And, I was fortunate enough to find somebody who met that criteria. But, again, to reiterate, that's the type of mindset you're looking for. You're looking for somebody who, when the chips are down, they're going to be in your corner and help you the way you need to be helped.
Yeah, I love it. What a great story. And hey, listen, in respect for your time and that of our audience, we are coming down to the bottom of our half hour. And I cannot thank you enough for sharing this information on insta-trust with us. I want to make sure people can get a hold of you. I'm just going to show them where they can.
Thank you.
You can actually find Dr. Jacobson on LinkedIn. There's the link if you want to, take that and be able to visit him there. And also, obviously, you can visit the website, and you can visit that over here on OMSX exclusively to visit. And if you want to get your hands on the book, you can reach out directly as well. So I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. Any final thoughts for our viewers before we go?
My final thoughts are your job is to make them care, to make them feel that you care, and then do it in a way that is comfortable for them and makes them feel at home with you, as opposed to having, just a rote script that you apply to everybody who comes through.
I love it. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And Greg Walters says great stuff. And
I see that.
I completely agree with Mr. Walters. So before we go any further, Ken, maybe you can talk a little bit about next week's show. Oh, looks like you're on mute.
He's mute.
So I can read because I'm not muted, but Feminine Negotiation with Cindy Watson next Wednesday, 5/17/23, same place, same time, 11 a.m. And as I always like to say, until next time, make sure you keep learning. And Ken, I'm not sure if we can hear you.
But keep leveling up.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, everybody.